All right, and we're live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Eric Bach, really grateful to have you. Thanks so much for joining me, man.
Michael, thank you for reaching out. I'm so glad we were able to get this on the books.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I appreciate you doing this. I really just enjoy the message that you put out from listening to your podcast, the Eric Bach Show, as well as just the online presence that you have. Just putting out just a really simple and really powerful message on fitness. So I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And yeah, just looking forward to enjoying a good conversation, learning more about you and your journey and your experiences.
I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well.
No doubt. So how did this all start for you? I'm always curious with coaches of like the origin stories of what got you into your first inspiration of health and fitness, which eventually led you into wanting to pursue a career in coaching and helping people. What was your first kind of insight or experience with getting into health and fitness that eventually led you into the coaching world?
Yeah, I think about this a lot, particularly as a parent, right? And for me, I mean, I always had a deep interest in sports, but even before that, I had parents who were active, right? Like I remember some of my earliest memories being 5 years old, and like my dad coming back from the dojo. He's always involved in martial arts, and he would like drop down on the floor. Maybe he's watching TV, but he'd be stretching, doing push-ups, things like that. And being a little boy, like I just wanted to be like dad, right? Like we tend to model habits and actions and behaviors more than we just listen. And so I realized I started doing things like that just to be like dad, right? And I love sports growing up though as well, watching football. I'm like, man, I want to be playing the NFL, like all these little things as a kid that really got me like kind of deeply embedded in terms of like physical fitness, in terms of health, in terms of like, what are these athletes doing? What are these people doing? And so in the very beginning, it began wanting to A, be like my dad, and second, be able to play well in sports. And so with the sports component, if we fast forward a little bit, like I was a pretty good athlete growing up as a kid, and then all of a sudden, everybody else in my class grew, and I was the little runt. I'll tell you what, man, I was like 5'3", 103 pounds. I remember seeing that like in the high school program when I was a sophomore, right? So I was like the last kid to grow, and I remember being incredibly frustrated, particularly after one football practice where we were playing or we were doing a kickoff, and I was like the last line of defense and had this other kid, the same class, but you know how it is in high school, right? Like you get some 14-year-olds who are like fully grown ass men, and then you got some who are like, hey, you can still be in fucking
You got the
elementary school.
5 o'clock
Fun
shadow
young.
by the end of the practice.
Exactly. And I was the far opposite side.
This episode is brought to you by Paluva. Paluva is a new zero-drop minimalist shoe with a distinctive five-toe design. Paluvas give you the most authentic barefoot style experience, but with sufficient cushioning to use for all manner of everyday movement, fitness, and athletics. I've been using these new shoes in both strength training and my daily walks, and I have to tell you, they are by far the best minimalist shoe that I've come across. The popularity of minimalist shoes have been on a big upswing, but Paluvas are a step ahead of every other zero-drop wide box shoe because of the critical feature of individual five-toe articulation, a separate slot for each of your toes. This allows for correct dynamic movement of the foot through walking or running, which is impossible when toes are encased in a single box. Now, minimalist shoes have faced controversy in recent years about causing injury from inappropriate use. So the big picture mission is start walking and living in Paluvas as often as possible. Use your specialized running shoes, basketball shoes, work boots, or high heels when you need to, but wear Paluvas as much as possible to reawaken the natural functionality of the human foot to stand, walk, run, and perform. And Paluvas also have a sleek, cool design, so you get a barefoot shoe that looks great as well as feels great. And now you can try a pair of Paluvas with no risk and realize that these are the most comfortable shoes you've ever worn. They are literally designed to feel like you're walking barefoot on a putting green. So you can go visit paluva.com and use a code SC15 for a 15% discount off your first pair. That's SC15 at checkout. Thank you very much. Let's get to the show.
And at this point, I had an angle, but like he could have outran the angle. And so instead of outrunning the angle, he planted and then ran through me, which normally you don't see on a kickoff, and it was just like I could hear him just like laughing as he did it, and getting like shit talked directly from my teammates. And it just happened to be a bad day like before that. And like I was just hanging my head. And I was never the type of person to hang my head, sulk, feel bad for myself because, for me, I'm always like, oh, you want to put an obstacle in front of me, I'm going to overcome it. But I just felt like so dejected and so powerless really in my body at that point. And one of my coaches, who also happened to be like the weightlifting coach, had a great weightlifting coach, competed clean and jerk, snatch, all that stuff, right? Who kind of saw the way it was hanging in my head. He knew that I had kind of been like lifting weights in the gym, but didn't really have a plan that I was following. And after that, we went up to the gym and he started working with me on a few different things. And we started jumping into more of a performance focused program. And like for that moment, I really kind of bought into the idea of what strength could do for me, not just physically, but internally and mentally. And so once my body caught up and I had these habits and I had this mindset of like more or less like the underdog mentality, and I was naturally a pretty good athlete, like great, setting records in terms of like 100-meter sprints at our school and became a pretty good athlete. Right. And so like that was really the jump start for me where it was like, wow, this shit can really transform my life in so many different areas. And it happened to be with a coach who kind of read my body language at that point and just like took me under his wing. Right. And so like that was such a profound moment for me. And so like as we fast forward it, going into college, unfortunately I tore my hamstring when I was a senior, like in a track meet, and then did it again like the first week in practice and playing football. And it was like, man, I'm a 5'9", 160-pound white corner, low and heavy. Like this isn't going to end well, right? And so I was so in love like with the training process though. And so I really just kind of dug in and talked to some of the higher level professors at the university and like, what can I do to kind of start getting involved in the sports teams early on? And so it really became something where I started training for the love of sport and seeing what was modeled by somebody I looked up to, my dad. And then it became to solve a problem that I had, feeling weak and insecure with my body. And by extension, I learned not just what strength can do for me physically, but also mentally, to the point where the actual process of the training and the preparation, I fell in love with that much more than I actually did the sports that I was training for. And so kind of that injury became an inflection point of like, hey, you know what? Like reality is I'm probably not going to go play in the show. You know what I mean? And so what if I lean into like this training side that I really love? And fortunately for me, like this got me started working with athletes really young. I mean, like when I was 19, I was working directly with our athletic programs. I was with one of my professors working with minor league baseball players in the off season, right? And so I was able to really accelerate my learning curve through that journey.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we all have those memories, right? Of that one time when you get knocked on your ass, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
that's such a come to Jesus moment in there. I remember I was always a good athlete, but I was more of on we used to call it husky. I was a chubby kid
Yeah.
and, played baseball, basketball. And then we had to do the mile run and I came in last one year and
Yeah.
everybody's walking back, like just already calm. And I'm still finishing the last like 150 yards. And those things just hold in your mind so powerfully. And as painful as they are sometimes that lightning rod to recognize, oh, I need to do something and I need to switch over into something else. So you mentioned that it was a big like internal and like mental focus and shift. So at an early age from there. So can see really the physical benefits when you first get into it and feeling that strength in your body. Was there anything particular that you felt from a mental standpoint or kind of that internal that like you really felt? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, it was just feeling like I was actually in control of being able to overcome adversity, right? And I think that's the beautiful thing about strength. It's like it's quite literally overcoming resistance that's trying to crush you. And with that, right, it was like, oh, I can do this. I can apply the same mindset to other things in my life, you know? And then there's also the aspect of delayed gratification, right? Like previously with my training, I'd rip out some shit from a magazine that had like 13 variations of bicep curls from Muscle and Fitness. I'm like, yeah, if I do this and take creatine, I'm going to be huge. And the reality is like I got into a really good strength program where I had consistent programming where my coach did a great job of saying like first we have to build technique, then we have to build this foundation, and as we do that, if we play the long game, like you're going to be bigger, you're going to be stronger, you're going to be faster, you're going to be more explosive. And buying into that, right, like from somebody who I trusted, was just such a profound thing. And like learning how to delay gratification in the gym eventually became the foundation for me to be able to like take big risks when it comes to business and when it comes to doing other things in my life that I also deem valuable. And by extension of that, like again, that's like kind of been rocket fuel for my business and my career over time based on these lessons that I learned directly from strength training and particularly the mental side.
Yeah. What was the early program that you were working on, like as a young kid with your coach? Was it more technique learning, things like explosive work, like Olympic lifting? Was it more like traditional strength training? What was like that early indoctrination for you like?
Yeah, so big thing I worked on with that first coach was definitely more like the Olympic lifting style. So a lot of jumps, a lot of cleans, snatches. Of course, we still had, bench, squat, deadlift, like those foundational things, but like really dialing into that explosive component really, really helped me, like where it's like 40-inch vertical, stuff like that. So like being able to have those components and really see what my body was capable of, like really unlocked my mindset of thinking like, wow, this is way different than maybe what you see in these muscle magazines that I was looking at before that was purely based on aesthetics. And that really brought my interest into like all these different ways that we can program for different physiological variables. And so like that was the foundation. We had like a new strength, or we had a new coaching staff for football come in, and then we did um, BFS, bigger,
Yeah,
faster,
the bigger,
stronger,
faster,
right? I
stronger.
think a
Yeah.
lot of people can relate to that, right? And so, then we had box squat, we had deadlift, we had, squat and bench. And again, like good solid rep schemes for building that foundational piece. But I also had a little bit more work that I was still doing with like the clean and jerk,
Yeah.
snatch, stuff like that, right? And so again, building like that really big foundational component was huge. And even after that, like once I got out of college, like I was really into 5-3-1 by Jim Wendler because it
Yep.
incorporated so many of the same principles. He's a football guy. Like that was like the age where, if you recall, where it was like fitness goes through these phases, and like we definitely had a big powerlifting phase where everyone was like, hell yeah, like strength is the foundation of everything. Everyone's reading Mark Ripito, or everyone's looking at,
Yep.
5-3-1, strong lifts. And again, like a lot of great things, maybe a little too heavy on the powerlifting side, but like, those programs right there were absolutely crucial. And now I see so many people go like, again, like optimizing exercise technique and like every little angle, like for their physique, like that stuff is great, but most people kind of lack that foundational baseline of strength to really
Yeah.
leverage a lot of things. At least that's what I'm seeing in the current trend.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, especially talking about young athletes and what's like the best thing for you. Because I remember the BFS programs in there, and strength is I mean, you need that foundation, right, to learn. But then the technique wise, like you teach young kids how to properly do Olympic lifts. Like I come from a
Oh,
hardstyle kettlebell background where we work on ballistics, and I'm like,
yeah.
it's a good tool to work with and build into young kids. But if you teach a kid how to properly do a clean and jerk or a snatch, like the other stuff is probably going to come a lot faster in
It's
regards to
wild.
foundation.
It's wild, man. Like I remember this other kid, man, I'm not gonna name names because I don't want to be rude, but like just not the sharpest tool in the shed, but he just like started doing a lot of the Olympic lifts as well and competed. Like all of a sudden, this kid is like 165 front squatting like 385 pounds.
Yeah.
Right. Like so he had like obviously some natural talent, like proclivities to be very strong. But like all of a sudden, like he picked up on this and all of a sudden, like, wow, like crazy. I just remember being completely blown away by it because in the other sports that we played, like he wasn't really a good athlete. And then all of a sudden he added these different layers. And I think one of the cool things about the Olympic style lifts is like you learn rhythm, timing, and coordination.
Yeah.
Right. Like you can't just rip the bar off the ground. Like the intent often is for something like a deadlift, because if you lose that body position, you're completely out of whack. And like every sport requires some level of rhythm, timing, and
Yeah.
coordination. And I do believe like really the only exercises or the style of exercises in the gym that teach you that primarily have a ballistic nature
Mhm.
and or are again like variations of clean squats, deadlifts, stuff like, or clean squats, jerks, all that.
Yeah, no, that carryover is definitely, prevalent in there. So then at 19 started working in college, working with professor, got a chance to work with athletes at that time, learn a lot from there. Where did coaching and life go from there? And when you got into more of like your personal training career and that type of work?
Yeah, I mean, man, I was such a more or less like exercise nerd at that point, right? Like I was reading T Nation every
Yeah.
day, Brett Contreras, Eric Cressy, like all the OGs in terms of like the blogging world. And so I kind of built on that, continued working with sports teams. Worked with a local sport performance gym for a couple of years as well at a young age, and then I got my CSCS when I was still in college, kind of like my last semester. So 22 years old, I already had 3+ years of coaching experience working with athletes,
Mm.
good certifications. And so at that point, I'd actually been dating my girlfriend. Now became my fiance, now my wife. So this turned out pretty well for about 3 years. And so, like as college graduation came up, man, like I loved where I was, but man, if I stayed there, I also like to party quite a bit. I'm like, I got to
Right.
get out of this environment, right? And again, love my friends, but I'm glad I made that move for me professionally and personally. But so I was like, hey, I can go over to Athletes Performance, which is now Exos. and do kind of another internship and kind of go that route, or I had a job offer for a gym out in Colorado where it was owned by the strength coach of the Denver Nuggets and it was attached to a Ritz Carlton. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good gig. And my wife Lauren got a job out there, so went into this. It was a kind of a combination of working like sport performance because like the NBA lockout was going out at that time, so like they needed more strength work and some of that stuff, and he had athletes that were coming back from like China who were playing overseas, but it also got me in somewhat like the big box, even like a luxury big box gym type environment that a lot of coaches kind of start with. And it helped me learn the business side of things. And this was really profound for me because I was skilled enough to build a good book of business pretty quickly, but the business was running into issues in terms of like finances, and I ended up going through like a managerial change. And so I remember applying to become like the new head trainer as they're going through the structure. And I didn't get it. I was 20, 23, 24 years old, which again, hindsight, yeah, probably wanted somebody with more experience. But my reward, despite having like made escalating performance things, was they were going to change the training structure. Everything was going to go to group training. It was going to be 30-minute classes. And then an external company would do all the programming for you. I'm like, this is not in alignment with anything that I came on for. And so at that point, I had been writing a little bit for my online business, basically just, a WordPress blog, writing about the clients that I had, the struggles that they had and the problems that we solved. And like that was starting to gain traction. I had my first couple online clients. This is back in like 2012, 2013. So a while back. But then I connected with Laura Landau, who ran Stephen Hawkins and then Landau Performance, which is a really high quality sport performance gym in the Colorado and Denver area. And so I was able to jump more back into that sport performance world, work with high level athletes there. I was able to bring over some of my top clients that I had, at this other gym. And then my online business kept growing. This is when I was writing for T Nation, bodybuilding.com, all of these different publications when, again, the game used to be, have a blog and that was it. Right.
It's huge. So, yeah. That's early days right there. Yeah.
It was great though, because like the best way that I learn is to read something and then be able to teach it. Yeah. I think you can probably relate to that too. And so I built this foundation and all of a sudden though, even that business kind of grew to a point where I started to have some friction because I was building kind of a bigger name and a reputation and some of these things, and had a fantastic mentor, world-class coach, and a great staff and access to great athletes. And I'm so grateful for that experience. But it got to the point where it was like, I couldn't really build the online thing as it was taking off while still working for somebody else. Was kind of creating friction. And then like time wise, how many hours in the day were there? And so I made a pivot and was just working with my own clients, kind of renting space out, at a gym in, Denver, Colorado. And gradually was building the online side, and kind of got to a point where the online side was just making more money. I was able to help more people. It was the best kind of time freedom balance for my wife, because we weren't sure where we wanted to live really long term at that point, away from a lot of family. And so I went all in on Bach Performance at that point. And yeah, man, it's been
here we
experience.
Are. Yeah. Was the online building a client base online, was that part of your mission and your thought process from early on, or did that just kind of start by happenstance, people reaching out and just asking if you did online training? Because you were pretty early on in like a lot of online, it's exploded over the last 5 years, a lot from the pandemic and everything there, but it was always a thing beforehand. It seems like you got in pretty early on.
Yeah. So it really wasn't something I cared about too much. Like I was reading a lot of the blogs, as mentioned, like in college, and seeing that, I'm like, oh, interesting. Like I would see digital products, I would see some of the coaching. And again, because I like to read, I like to write, I just naturally started writing with it. And by extension, being featured on different blogs and building that up, then we started to have some inquiries. And so, if you think back to it, I kind of mentioned when that first gym that I worked at kind of went through that structural change. Yep. That was when John Goodman, who runs the Personal Trainer Development Center, had his like first coaching group ever. Right. And so I remember sitting anxiously in my room. I'm like, I want to learn this thing because I'm not happy with this lack of flexibility that I have just working for somebody else. Like I learned pretty quickly that there aren't a whole lot of 40-year-old strength coaches who do not feel like crap from being on their feet all day long. Right. And so I wanted to start building something. And so I hired John Goodman. I remember being incredibly nervous to invest what I was with something like that. So I can really relate to that experience. And then just kind of grew from there. Right. Like that really helped me hone in my writing, hiring different mentors and growing from that point. So it wasn't really part of my vision in the beginning. I just wanted to help people. Specifically, I wanted to help athletes, wanted to help people not struggle with some of the injuries and some of the issues that I had. and be able to look, feel, and perform the way that they wanted. And the online component naturally evolved from me exploring and sharing my more or less like experiences with my clients. And as it really grew, then of course, like you have the freedom of time that you don't really have a lot of times as a coach, able to make more money with the time that I do have, or
Right.
meaning I could actually fund retirement. I could actually pay for insurance and these things
Mhm.
that a lot of people don't think of when they jump into becoming a coach because they do it purely for the love. And so it's something where it just kind of evolved from that point and took off
Yeah.
from there.
Yeah. What was, as a coach, what's the biggest difference or challenge that you faced in training somebody in person to training somebody online? Was it a big difference in how you approached it, or was it pretty similar?
The experience I have in person really helped me program more effectively online. I think that's something that's really missing in the industry now. You get people who frankly, you get people without certifications who jump into online coaching. And because they've been in good shape, they think that they know how to program. The reality is, when it comes to online, like you don't have your eyes on a person. You can't make actual, like if you see somebody shifting in a squat, like you can end the set, you can break it down, you can cue, and you can make sure that people are getting dialed back in, right? And so the biggest difference that I found between in person and online is a people inherently think that they know a little bit more, have better technique than they do. And so without checks and balances, especially online, you have people that are doing programs that might be misaligned for what they want and with poor technique, right? It's like practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. So you have
Right.
to dial in a technique side. And so what I found is online specifically, you have to simplify things quite a bit in terms of like your progressions. You have to, for us, like we do form checks, videos like coming in so we can actually do a movement diagnostic and really stay on top of those things with the online space. Otherwise, you don't really know how well people are executing the plan that they have. In addition, you have to be clear cut in your explanations on what you're doing and why. Again, that's something that coaches can naturally do when they're speaking with a client.
Mhm.
But many times when it comes to online, it's like, unless you're really thorough with your programming and explaining it, people aren't going to get that. And without it, there's not going to be a buy in. And without that buy in, the ability to implement anything consistently is not going to be there. Right. So, like the attention to detail, I feel like actually has to be a lot higher when it comes to being online. And it has to be simpler in the beginning until people really prove that they're ready to progress because you're putting people in a position where A, they're not likely to succeed. B, the chance of injury is going to be higher.
Yeah. It is. It's interesting because I've gone through that transition from in person to online, and it's been an interesting journey in there.
Yeah.
Specifically, like the type of person I felt that's ready for more of an online versus an in person. Have you seen a difference in like the people that succeed very well with more of like an online programming coach versus somebody who might need more in-person work?
Yeah, I mean, the people who typically do best in my experience online, like they have some level of experience in the gym already. They're internally driven and self-motivated,
Yeah.
right? Um, you know, in-person training has a ton of benefits, and sometimes one of the biggest benefits for somebody is like making a promise to somebody else that you're going to be at the gym at this particular time and not wanting to let that person in person down. I think where people struggle in the online world is I need motivation to do this, I need motivation to do that, and just like this overall idea that just having a coach is going to do that work for you.
Right.
The reality is like a coach cannot teach desire and optimize performance at the same time, right? Like if you want somebody who's going to hold your hand, who's going to like be really rah rah with you there in that one particular moment when you're in the gym, in person might be a little bit better for you. You're going to pay more. You're probably not going to get as much support in the other areas of your life that need more work, like
Mhm.
some of the education, nutritional sides. But until you dial in a consistency, it's going to be very hard. Whereas like online, you can get world class, high level customization with your training, nutrition, all of that stuff, like from people well outside your area. I think that's the beautiful thing about it. And it can teach you to become more self-sufficient and to be able to plan your day more effectively and like make it a priority to train at this time and become more internally driven. However, for some people, I think getting over that initial hump of like, I need the motivation, I need somebody there with me is a little bit too hard. Frankly, it's a little bit of a pet peeve. Like I get it, I totally get it, but
Mhm.
it's also a pet peeve for me. But like those aren't my people, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not going to hold your hand to get to the gym. Like I'm going to provide an expert plan. I'm going to be there to support you. But
Yeah.
like
Think
nano.
what do you think that is with people who ask that question? I'm always curious about that question too, of like I need motivation in there. And I'm always pondering like Is it just you haven't really dug deep into why the goal is of why you want
Yeah.
to do this? Or like what do you think that is?
Yeah. So in my experience with this is typically they don't need motivation. Like if they're having a conversation about their health and fitness, they're clearly motivated. So it's somewhat of a like again, it's kind of like when somebody says tone, I know exactly what they mean, and I'm not going to be an asshole and say
Right.
like you mean losing fat and building muscle, right?
Right. It's just
No, like in the case of this, what I often think about and kind of how I reframe like the conversation is like it sounds like you're motivated. We wouldn't be here having a conversation if you were not motivated to make a change. Perhaps what it is you're overwhelmed with all the information out there and you don't have enough support to stick with it consistently. Is that a fair assessment? And then people are gonna be like, yeah, that's actually exactly what it is. Because now more than ever, like we can relate to this even as coaches. Like there's a million different diet strategies, there's a million different workout plans, and people are becoming such good freaking marketers that like everything sounds like the perfect thing all the time. And so you do something for a couple of weeks, you don't get results fast enough because your expectations are skewed. Then you see the next thing and you hop into it, and pretty soon people build this belief of like nothing works for me. And so then that motivation or that feeling of self-belief goes down. And then we're like, I need more motivation. And the reality is expectations are out of alignment. They have issues in terms of like fitting things into their busy schedule because they have so much going on. And what we need to often do is like pull back, help educate on the basic principles that drive success, and then filter in like what type of training, what type of nutrition is going to be practical, what's going to be sustainable, just to get that momentum and that ball rolling again. And pretty soon, once people start to do things consistently, it's not about motivation. It's
yeah.
about who you are. It's about your identity and being true to that promise that you make yourself.
Yeah, I love that description, Eric, because I've thought about this of, motivation on a feelings and emotional side is very subjective. So I've always asked like, well, what's the objective side of motivation? And as you just described, well, if you're having a conversation and seeking something out to help you with this,
Yeah.
objectively you are motivated because you've taken action. It might not be a huge action where you see like a Rocky cutscene where the music's playing in the background and you're running from one thing. Some people think that's like motivation. It's like all these different snippets put together and it's this highly driven and like clear cut, drive that's going forward. No, any small action that you're taking towards a goal that you have, whether it's physically doing something or seeking out advice or guidance in that, yeah, objectively you are motivated. And I've asked that question to people too. And you see that twinkle in their eye where they kind of cock their head like a dog. It's like, oh yeah, I am motivated. I'm here
Yeah.
sitting with you right now. It's one of those cool like shifts that you get into.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's one of the most important things as a coach, right? Like you have to be able to have conversations in a way where you have to be able to frame what's a difficult conversation where to an extent, like you're kind of calling on bullshit a little bit,
Yeah.
but you don't want to be a dick about it, right? Like it's different. I mean, if we're having a conversation, we've known each other for a long period of time. It's a little bit different. Like if your best friend's like, man, you look like shit today,
Yeah, exactly.
versus like a complete stranger's like, man, you look like shit today. Do you even lift? I'm like, man, like my best friend says that. I'm like, man, fuck you, right? Like having
Yeah,
fun.
exactly. Yeah.
Then I go to my YouTube comments and I'm like, wait, this guy, this guy says, do you even lift? And this guy says, like, are you on steroids? I'm like, huh, complete strangers. This
You're
is
getting the
strange.
pendulum
Anyway,
on both sides.
totally, man. Like, just feed that body dysmorphia. Like, let's go.
Yeah. No, I had this, Eric, like in person for a while. And then during COVID, a lot of things changed. We had a studio and we were shut down in New York for 9 months. And a
Yeah.
lot of people were doing great in our studio. And then they slowly started to fall off. We had an online program. We had classes that we were doing from our studio that people could go into. But people are slowly falling off. And one of the weird answers I got when we were reaching out to people, when I was like, how's your spirits? How things going? I see you're not coming to class anymore. One of the answers I got from a lot of people was, I don't feel like I know what I'm doing if you're not there. And it was really a paradigm shift for me in thinking, because I was like, oh, as much as we were helping people, telling them what to do, at the same time, we were subconsciously enabling people at the same time to rely on somebody, whether it's an external studio or an external person, to be that guiding motivation. We weren't teaching people how to be autonomous or self-sufficient. And it was a
Yeah.
big shift in my mind. It was like, that's why I thought the online way of coaching I really enjoyed, because it is simultaneously you're guiding people on the journey, but it is up to the person to have their hands on the wheel and drive the car. You're not taking the wheel over and putting your foot on the gas pedal. You have to build more of a self autonomy. And I think this is one of the issues I've seen with the fitness industry in general, where we only have 5% of people succeed long term in their health and fitness. It's, I think, because
Yeah.
we get into these short term programs where you're getting told exactly what to do every step. And yeah, that might be a good thing to get you through the door. But as far as a sustaining approach for life, there's going to be more steps along the way.
Yeah, 100%. And this is a conversation I have quite honestly, like with a lot of my clients. Like, hey, can I have a meal plan? I'm like, how about like a meal structure? Right? Because if I tell you exactly what to eat, you're going to be like, I don't like this food. Right. And like, then if I'm making tweaks nonstop, then you're going to be like, I'm bored of this. And so it comes down to the old quote, right? Like, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man a fish, he can feed himself for the rest of his life. And there's like a really fine balance of showing people what they need to be able to do and kind of break down like what the steps are, helping them understand the why, and then like gradually even pulling back on some of that support. And when it comes to like them asking questions, is like, what do you think the right answer is? Right?
Mhm.
Because first, when people are told what to do, like, does it eliminate that short term, like, I need to know type feeling that they have? Yes. But if you teach people how to think, how to become self sufficient, like with that thought process and start to think, what are the changes I should be making? What is my body telling me here? That's where that autonomy really comes, right? Like the ultimate goal for a coach is creating people who are self sufficient, right?
Mhm.
From a business sense, listen, I mean, if everyone becomes self sufficient, they stop buying your product. Like from a business sense, you might be like, oh no. But the reality is, if you teach people how to become self sufficient and they realize like how helpful you've been and you've built a great relationship, they'll often stay with you for a long, long period of time. In part because they're also like, I don't want to have to think about my programming because I've got, 37 employees, I've got 3 kids, I get, 6 hours of sleep at night, and I'm really busy. Right. And so I think being able to walk that line of what are the underlying principles that we're trying to teach our clients and how can we communicate in a way where like, yeah, we're decreasing kind of the thought process so they can start to see results right away. But then how can we gradually build that knowledge base where they can take the reins? Because I think
Yes.
that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I heard a quote about retention in business, and somebody said, retention is not preventing people from leaving, it's giving them a reason that they want to stay. And
Yeah.
that hit me right off the bat as far as like,
Yeah.
because people think that all the time, like, oh, I don't want to lose people and like kind of be that crutch for them. No, if you give people that self autonomy, like they're gonna want to stay with you. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so the work that you do now, I mean, you work with a lot of men, specifically kind of younger men, like young dads that are getting in, trying like kind of struggling with getting their programs down with all the things that they have that's going on in life. What are the common struggles that you see from men specifically in trying to get into their best shape from a physical side, from a mental side? What are the common longest levers that you see?
Yeah. I mean, hey, listen, I'm as guilty as this as anybody, but like guys have a lot of ego around their workouts, and many do not quite know as much as they think they do about like their type of programming and the things that they're doing and their technique. And so one of the difficult things is like navigating that conversation. Like I always want my clients to highlight the things that they enjoy that have worked well for them in the past, but it's also understanding that like what worked for you at 25 when you were single, when you had your job, but like your weekends are going out, all this stuff is going to be a lot different from what your life is like now when you're getting less sleep, you have more stress, more responsibility, less time to work out. Your body's changed probably a little bit from a physiological and hormonal perspective, and you have more wear and tear on your joints. And so we can't just force feed the same type of workout without like a different adjustment when it comes to your nutrition, stress management, sleep, and lifestyle. So I'm a huge proponent of what we call synergy. In fact, like one of the elements inside of our coaching is our synergy coaching system. And if you think about a business from a perspective, right? Like if you have a business and you have your sales, your marketing, and then your product, if they're all congruent, you probably have a good business. But if you have good sales, good marketing, and a shitty product, well, you're going to churn and burn, right? Like that's like the old like info product days.
Yep.
And if you have a good product and good marketing, but you can't sell, you're never going to have anybody in the business. And so it's going to collapse. Much in the same way, we need the right balance between what your training looks like, what your nutrition looks like, and what your recovery, what your lifestyle, what those things look like. And in most times, guys are really incongruent with that. I see it more and more now with like even we're still kind of like this low carb, like carnivore bullshit craze. Like we have people who are overly stressed out on a ton of stimulants, who are following a lot of high intensity training, which again is going to be more carbohydrate driven from a performance component. If you don't
Right.
have it, you're going to burn through muscle and drop up cortisol again. And then we have, of course, like lack of sleep, high stress time period. Frankly, like the last 5 years, we can all relate have been just more overall stress, I think, for everybody across the board. And so when we have this misalignment between these different factors, you could be doing things that are quote unquote healthy, but they're not aligned. Right. And this is where so many people feel like, hey, I know exactly what to do, but I'm not getting results. Like the reason is you might know like healthy things to do, but they don't blend together. They do not fit.
Mm,
Right. And so like that's where I see the big issue. And so for men specifically, and men and women, frankly, and I would say like 30 to 40 is a big kind of like age range where we help a lot of people. It's like people are just really stressed out. People are not getting good sleep, and then they're leaning into a lot of these diets that are inherently going to drive up cortisol a little bit more based on the way that they're designed. And then their training's misaligned with that. So they work really hard, and then it's like, how come I'm not seeing results? This is often the reason. And then even when we go through and do blood work, we see not necessarily elevated cortisol, but like we see a lot of people like suppress thyroid function, suppress testosterone levels, high BG, all these different things that are going on where it's like, yeah, like we've got to get the body back into alignment because a body that's overstressed and unhealthy doesn't really give a shit about body composition. So we got to kind of get that foundation
right.
back first. And then we can help you, as we like to say, look great naked.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's that word healthy is out there so much about like
Yeah.
and that's the overall thing, right? And I've talked to people with this about nutrition. Like, well, there's a difference between eating healthy and eating for a body composition goal. Like, it's like
Yeah.
you need to know your numbers if you want to change your body composition. Like that's you just have to go into that. There's other ways to get around it, but like it's going to be more by accident or by happenstance. But it's like, yeah, you might be quote unquote hearing something from the Huberman lab that says like it's healthy, but as you said, like, is it synergistic with what you're looking at right now? So I really like that approach. Is there one part of that synergy that seems like it's more of a challenge for people to implement or wrap their heads around more than others?
I would say, frankly, like I'm going to talk about the nutrition side, right? And so, and we can even talk about this like from a coaching business perspective. People want to get quick results. It's been drilled in their brains forever. Naturally, as human beings, we want to see something quick, right? And so we can probably both relate that we see a lot of people who do these like aggressive short-term diets that works pretty well. Generally, it's going to be low carb, high protein, something like that. They lose a bunch of weight, but then they gain it back. And so one thing that we see with a lot of people coming in is like, we do start fairly aggressive with a diet approach because we know that people are going to buy into what we're doing a little bit more because it's going to allow us to teach them what we do on the back end. Right. And so for us, what we do on the back end is like, yeah, we get people that quick win in terms of weight loss, but we highlight like, hey, if we, for example, and there's some interesting research on this. I don't have the study in front of me right now, but like even with high level athletes, if you're at a calorie deficit for more than it's like 4 to 6 weeks, and we're talking 25% calorie deficit, which a lot of people go way above that in terms of how aggressive they diet, we start to see, decreases of testosterone, elevations in cortisol, suppression of thyroid function, even over that time period, right? And then we get people who come in having done that for weeks, months, and years. Like we can't just rip the floor out from underneath you, right? Like, so what we do is, yeah, we might have a short-term aggressive diet period because, like, yeah, they're excited, they're going to be really compliant with it, but then we start to reverse calories right back up already because we need to make sure that we're restoring metabolic function, thyroid function, keeping an eye on like stress, cortisol, cravings, all of these other factors that often prevent people from acting in alignment with the thing that they want most, which crushes their self-belief, right?
Mhm.
And so it's like tying that in, like, hey, this is why we're bumping carbohydrates up. This is why we are increasing calories back up after this short phase. Because if we don't, this is probably what's happened before, right? Okay, we want to prevent that from happening, make sure that your body's in a healthier state. And now, because we are a little bit leaner, physiologically speaking, like your body's in a much better position, we can still lose fat and have a little bit more balance in the things that we're doing, from that point. All right. So hopefully that wasn't like too far in the weeds and it made sense.
No, I love it. It's I had Ben Oliver, who's a head performance instructor at Superhuman last week, and talking about that metabolic recovery phase after fat loss. And
Yeah.
it's a rough spot to be in. I've been there myself. I went through a cut for too long. I went for like 14 weeks, and it's
Yeah.
I was always a leaner guy. I was easy. My joints feel better often, like when I'm leaner, but you can go to that spot where it's now taking some time to rebuild the system
Yeah.
up because your body will adapt to it and it will drop down, and things do drop. Mood changes in different ways as well. Like you start to see these other factors that come in. And yeah, so I've seen people that I've worked with who have gone these like crash diet, and all of a sudden now you're just naturally almost in kind of a crash phase for so long. You need to reverse that process. It's a challenging phase to be in, but you got to put that
Yeah.
time to do that work.
Well, and you're often in a recovery phase like that for longer than you are the particular cut.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been in the same boat, right? Like I used to do a lot of photo shoots and, walk around all the time at like 6 to 8%. And like, tell you what, like having done blood work before and after these shoots, and then like, having like a bender basically after a photo
Yeah.
shoot and see what that does to your body. It's like, yeah, this is tough, right? And like understanding that a lot of people again will kind of like crash diet, then go on vacation, and like what that does to the body and how it like more or less like predisposes you for a lot more fat regain on the back end. That's an experience I think a lot of coaches should actually go through, like a hard cut, and then like
Yeah.
understanding what it's like to try to hold that. Because inherently, you get some coaches who, again, might have been overweight when they're younger, and like that's the reason they want to get in shape. But you get a lot of people who, I guess, in a sense, are similar to me, like where they were athletes, like they didn't struggle with weight loss, right? But like going through that process of like what it feels like to actually go through a very aggressive cut and how your brain really changes,
Yeah.
how your mood changes, all of these things. I think it gives you a different level of understanding, at least to a sense, on what it's like when somebody chronically diets for a long period of time. Even if, again, your body shape might be different, but like from a physiological sense, like you can
Yeah.
experience some of what's going on there.
It's a weird thing of going so extreme, and I've wondered it. It's like because I went through a period of time, like got to, sub 6% body fat at times, and it's like cool to see those numbers. But when you actually get there and then you're living in it and the cognitive change that you have, like it is, you recognize the other side, like this is not worth it to try and do on a year-round basis. And
Yeah.
it's interesting too, Eric. I always try and I look through the lens of, I've been a coach for 16 years, and I think you can probably attest to this too. Like sometimes just I'm in this world every day. So if I see things out there, I can call bullshit a little bit faster, I think, than maybe normal people, but I try and look through the lens of like what like the regular person is seeing who's trying to get in shape. And there's so much Fitspo stuff out there of like seeing these people who are just shredded up for a photo shoot and thinking that that is what you need to aspire to do. Like that's what fitness is. And then you don't see the other sides of it as well. Like it's a hard thing
Yeah.
sometimes to really just kind of blend through and kind of look through just the client's eyes at many times as well.
Yeah, I mean, let's dig into this a little bit, right? I think that's a really powerful thing. Man, I try to think like when I first started consuming fitness information, like I was picking up good like muscle and fitness muscle magazines back in the day. Was that meant for me? Was that the target audience? No. Was most of the information not great for what I wanted to do? No. But you know what it did? It hooked me in and it built an interest. And through that interest, I began seeking knowledge for myself,
Mhm.
right? And so I think in today's world on social media, people are like quick to point something out and be like, no, the evidence doesn't say this, right? And I think, again, I think the evidence-based crowd does a lot of good things, but I think they still also cherry pick a lot of things without context of what it's like for a person, um, in everyday life, or just like, again, we all have our biases. And I think it's still readily apparent, like in that kind of group. And to me, I think a lot of times what's lost is like, no person's ever going to have 100% correct information. A lot of times when somebody has something that comes out and all of a sudden like, hey, it's not the perfect information, then people try to write off everything they've ever done. Like that's just kind of like the
Right.
polarization we have in our society right now. Like we saw a lot of the stuff with Huberman. Like I've seen people like shitting on Huberman. I'm like, you know what? Like he might exaggerate like on a couple like a couple things, and like you might not believe like everything that he
Mhm.
says, or like maybe you think it's like this is tied into whatever supplement he's selling. But by and large, he's done a massive positive to people's overall awareness for like health and wellness. And I think some people are so concerned about being right for like their little thing that they completely
Right.
forget about the benefits elsewhere. Right. And so I think like that's a huge issue that we have in the industry where it's like, are you trying to be right or are you trying to be helpful?
Mm.
Because a lot of times somebody's going to get hooked into something that's mainstream in the beginning because it's catchy, because it's compelling, because it's marketed efficiently. We can spot like what's good, what's not, because we just have like this vast experience of it. But I think automatically shitting on these things without seeing, okay, great. This is somebody who's anxious to learn and like they saw that this thing was interesting. Cool. Like, what can we lean into that? Because if you immediately tell somebody the thing that they're like really hooked into and like they're excited about is wrong, you know what you've done? Like, you've shut down A, their confidence, and B,
Yeah.
your influence. Right. So, like, how's that going to help? Instead, be like, hey, awesome. Like, let's have a conversation about that. Like, okay, yeah, this is really cool. Hey, check this out. Like, this is like a different way to think about this as well. Right. You know, I think if we have a conversation around that versus like not just trying to be right, but like trying to lean into maybe somebody's interest about a particular topic, about something that they're currently trying and gradually educate, that's going to be so much more helpful for people to actually become self sufficient and seek out good quality information that's going to be congruent with the goals that they have long
Yeah.
term, you know?
That distinction you said of, do you want to be right or do you want to be helpful? Like that's the line of being a zealot versus being a good coach, right? And it's
Yeah.
interesting. I mean, research can tell us so much if we're going into, like, if you're looking at it from a biased side. I think Lane Norton just said this, is like, I can make an argument that smoking is good for you. And he's like said, I can make it
Yeah.
look like that. Like it actually decreases the risk of Parkinson's. It's like there's actually a benefit to it. But we all know that smoking is bad for you and you shouldn't smoke. It's like, but if you're only looking for one specific thing, you can make a case for it in there. So you got to look at it with a little bit more open eyes. But I was in this
Yeah.
boat for a while. Like I came from learning from Pavel Tatsulin and the RKC and Strong First system, and I'm still a part of it and I love it, so much. But I've seen people go into like the kettlebell zealot side of like the kettlebell's the only tool that you can
Yeah.
use and it's the only thing that you need. And I was in that zone for a little bit and then got into more body weight and then getting into barbell training and then getting into some more applications of mobility. It's like, no, there's all good things and modalities that you can bring into. Like there's not just one tool that's needed. The more tools you have in your toolbox, you can be more helpful. But as you
Yes.
said, I think these debates that you can get into with stuff of like this is right versus this is right, it's not helpful. You're actually just confusing more people because they don't know what's the right way or the optimal way to do it. And what most people do at that time is they freeze. They don't do anything. And they're like, well, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to not do anything because this is too much for me.
Yeah. People don't want to feel dumb. Like the moment you make somebody feel dumb, like they're shutting that down.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So, how is I mean, you've been in the game now for a while. Have you seen your approach to coaching change over the time of working with people? Like, are there things that you do now more than you did in the past because you saw the importance of it? Or were there also things maybe that you thought were really important at the beginning that you realized weren't really as important to focus on down the line?
Yeah. I mean, I think naturally as a coach, as your training changes, as your life experience changes, like those experiences start to bleed into your coaching, right? And so in the beginning, I mean, I was reading super training. I'm working with high level athletes, right? And so like I wanted to experiment with a lot of these things. And like sometimes I would definitely program things that were like, sorry, like my 37-year-old accountant doesn't need to have, percentage based training right now. He just wants to lose 20 pounds and, and feel better. Right. And so
Right.
I think to an extent, like when I was younger, it was not even intentionally like showing how much I know, but like weaving in a lot more advanced concepts than I really needed, right? Because ultimately, like success does come down to the ruthless execution of the basics of a few things, right? It's like, are we getting progressive overload in the gym? Are we being very consistent? Are we maximizing our technique with our reps? Are we getting better and following a plan that we can stick with consistently even when life gets chaotic, right? Nutrition. Are our calorie needs in alignment with our particular goals? We can take whatever mechanism, we can take whatever diet tools to get there, but what's going to be best for that person, right? And so I think for me, inherently, I was a little bit more tool focused or method focused, whereas now I'm more principle focused. And building that skill set of education experience over time provides the ability to use whatever method is going to attack whatever principles needed for an individual at that time, right? And so for me, I've realized that like the stress reduction, not even stress reduction, but like stress resilience. I think there's only so much we can do to reduce stress in the modern world, but like how can we make a person more resilient to be able to handle whatever life throws at them
Mm.
is an important concept. So like I focus on that a lot. Sleep optimization, and frankly, for a lot of people, like just going in, getting blood work, getting some basic data. Like a lot of my clients now, again, are like 30 to 40, and a lot of people think that they have issues with their hormones. They think they have issues with testosterone. They
Right.
think they have all this. Like it's a very common talking point now. And to me, it's like, how about instead of spending, $250 a quarter on testosterone boosters, you go get your blood work done once and find out what the root cause is.
Yeah.
And so like I've definitely simplified my approach to be very principle based and really thinking like what can we do consistently versus what's always going to be optimal from a scientific sense, because unless we're consistent it doesn't matter. And then being data driven though on the information that we are getting, like can we
Mhm.
get blood work, can we get that stuff, nutrition's not dialed in or something doesn't feel right, let's track it, let's find out why, and let's make those adjustments based on the knowledge that we have. And I think through that lets us cut through a lot of bullshit, right? It's like it's still personalized, but like data directs decisions and eliminates drama. So if you don't know what's going on with something, collect some data first, and then you can be able to make informed decisions on it and make it relevant to the person in front of you.
Yeah. I love that because, and I think that's something that all coaches eventually get to is recognizing data is so powerful. Clarity is king with people. It's like, because it's so
Yes.
easy to theorize everything. Oh, I think I have this because I just listened to this. It's like, oh, I have low testosterone. Well, have you had your testosterone check? Like, don't
Yeah.
guess on it. Like, actually get some accuracy. Trevor Kashi from TKN has the best line. He's like, you owe it to yourself to be as accurate as possible. And he's like, and he used it from like a nutrition, concept, but I'm like, that's just a philosophy for life. Like, yeah, the more accurate you can see of exactly what's going on and take a little bit of time, then that's like a GPS system. Okay, now you know exactly where you are. Now, okay, this is where you want to go. Now you can bridge the gap. And I've seen people like when you get that clarity, the shoulders drop like that. Talk about stress reduction. Like that's a stress reduction right there of just understanding and
Yeah.
just getting this information for the first time in their life.
You know what? I had a conversation like that with a client yesterday. We're kind of talking a little bit about like, I don't just want to show you everything to do, but I was like, hey, here's what a sample meal plan looks like if you're going to be very clean and you're eating 2,000 calories. And she's like, oh my God, that's so much food. I'm like, it's very clean. So a little bit different, like when you're not adding butter and oil and dressing and like all these different things that people add a lot of times without paying attention, to their meals, what drastically shoots calories way, way too high. And so it's like just kind of one of those paradigm shifts. And she was like, oh my God, like this is so fascinating. And like for her, it was like just seeing this difference. Um, it's wild.
Yeah,
It's wild.
that's awesome. Eric Bach, everybody. Eric, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. I'm grateful for the time that you spent today, but also the work that you're doing and putting out there. I really think that you have a great message and the work that you're doing speaks for itself. So I appreciate it.
Michael, thank you for making the time, man. It's been a blast jamming with you here, and yeah, thank you.
No doubt. Yeah. So if people want to check out more of the work that you're doing, follow your stuff, what's the best place that they can go and check it out?
Yeah, Instagram, I put out the most content. So at Bach Performance, Bach Performance. I hope you guys can all spell that. Just kidding. I'm sure you can. Check that out. Or Eric Bach on YouTube. We do have a little bit more long form stuff directly on YouTube, which is great. I'm not a huge fan of like all the shorts, all the short term stuff, because I don't think context can be applied. So we're really starting to double down on YouTube, providing some more value there as well.
Awesome, man. Well, great, dude. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Listeners, thank you so much. Go follow Eric, and I will check you guys in the next one. All right, peace.